Welcome back to Strange Form. Today we are going to be doing something a little different. This entire episode is going to be dedicated to a reading of the opening chapter of my book, Verses. This opening prologue is set up in the first person in order to thrust you into the world from the point of view of one of its inhabitants. However, as the story progresses forward, everything else but one fourth wall breaking chapter is going to be in the third person. This opening will pose many more questions than it will answer, but this is a very large and sweeping world that will be explored thoroughly throughout the rest of the book. The story follows an eccentric cast of characters in both the world of the gods and the realm of men. In the last days of Cleopatra's reign, as Rome closes its grip around her empire, a battle is being fought behind the scenes to keep the gods set from releasing Apep, the Chaos Worm. With a cast of Greek, Roman, early Celtic, and Egyptian gods, as well as demons and angels, the story weaves its way through a world of gods and monsters as they try to make sense of man's fickle belief structure and the way changing times leave them permanently altered. If you'd like to know more about this project, watch my previous video where I talk about the planned story arc across 3 books. For this opening episode, I decided to create a visual storyboard to help set the mood and tone for the ongoing story. I did this with a combination of my own artwork and pictures, as well as videos I created through Midjourney and a still image motion program. Every AI image has been trained on my own photography, sketches, and artwork, and then worked on extensively in Photoshop. My hope is that this will be a good handshake to introduce my storytelling style to a larger audience. Depending on the popularity of this episode, I may produce more chapters in a similar style or move it over to a podcast medium. But right now, I am attempting to get this to the widest audience possible. So if you enjoy this, please share it with everyone you know, and even a few people you don't. Hopefully this episode will gain enough attention to provide proof of concept to would-be producers and backers. And if you're watching this and have interest in contacting me about the project, don't hesitate to reach out through YouTube, my website, or Instagram account, the addresses of which can all be found in the description of this video. Now please, sit back and enjoy Verses, Prologue, The Jackal. Prologue, The Jackal. It's cold here, not cold like the desert at night. Different, wet, a cold I can feel in my bones. I'm so numb, only vaguely aware of how fast I'm running or how badly my muscles ache. I'm seeing spots, and I'm in fear of blacking out. The only thing keeping me conscious are these damn leaves and branches stinging my body as they pass around me. This whole place seems to be alive and set on keeping me from leaving. What are these creatures? Chasing me, no hunting me. I fear that if I am to die here in this foreign place, beyond the borders of anything I find familiar, I will be consumed by it. The canopy hides me from the light of Ra, and I doubt he will send a second envoy should I fail to return. If I die here, I fear my soul will be trapped, lost. Wait, it's getting warmer. I think I'm close now. Yes, I am, less than 100 steps from the fields. I can see the golden light, the tall grass, the sand. Just a little further, home. In this last dash, my frenzied thoughts are slowing my perception of time, each footfall feeling like 1,000 miles from the previous step, and an eternity to the next. All the while, I'm reflecting on the events that led me to this terrifying plight. How did I stumble into this situation? It's hard to pinpoint one single moment, one decision I should have made differently. I'm commander of the 3rd tier of Anubis's Jackal Guard. An honor to be sure, but being singled out for a mission this clandestine was beyond just honor. It was a great responsibility. When Anubis informed me, Ra had named me in specific for a scouting envoy, past the forbidden borders of our land no less, I was deeply honored. Why me though? To that point, I had not done one thing of note. I was just another soldier, except that statement is not entirely true. I do have one claim to notoriety. I have no memory of any event before the Ptolemaic Empire, an oddity that, to my knowledge, only Anubis and Ra knew of, and I was to tell no one. Thus, this affliction didn't feel like notoriety at all. It felt like an encumbrance. Anubis often treated me as a shepherd would in the care of a lame animal, and though they had no knowledge of my history, the others in the kingdom always seemed to look at me with a certain amount of pity, like I was the only one unaware of some terrible revelation. Fulfilling any duty Ra entrusted me would surely be an opportunity to prove myself capable of shouldering greater responsibility, possibly even advancing my standing in the hierarchy of things, a way to shed the shadows of my unknown past. Some called the forest borders to our north the River of Dreams. Others simply referred to it as the Deadlands, but most viewed it as something more than the Land's End. By any name, intrusion into this place was strictly forbidden, and the dark forest to the north was not the only forbidden lands. Jungles to the east, mountains to the west, and deserts to the south. It was unknown to most whether our land was the end of all that is or the beginning. Personally, I always assumed that the lands beyond our borders were merely an aesthetic, possibly to inspire creativity or maybe inform our dreams, a monument to all which the light of Ra touches. In practice, though, I believe these places were most likely an uninhabited ghost world, a place without cohesion or order, where reality became memory and memory became ether. At least, that was my perception. There were indeed many superstitions surrounding what lies beyond our borders, most ending in the long-held assumption that those foolish enough to penetrate any further than the edge would surely be driven mad, or worse, doomed to walk eternity beyond the light of Ra. I had always refused to concern myself with such child's nonsense. The idea that anything existed beyond the upper and lower kingdom, the mortal realm, and the Duat was preposterous. Ra is the most powerful of all the gods. He is the center of all, and nothing lies beyond his reach, for surely his reach encompasses existence itself. And furthermore, human devotion had built us a vast empire. We are the very essence of Egypt. We are the pinnacle of culture and the epitome of civilization. Without us, all mortal empires would simply wither and die. Surely, there was nothing hiding beyond our borders that could hope to challenge our divinity. But I am low. Though I am filled with divine pride, my beliefs are based on nothing more than rhetoric. I see that now. After Anubis informed me of my assignment, I was told to immediately ready myself and appear before Ra in the Great Hall. Anubis also warned I was to speak of this meeting to no one. The nature of my mission was too sensitive to let slip into gossip, before Ra could frame the situation. As I quickly strode the corridors towards the Great Hall, I couldn't help but consider how the position of first-tier general had recently been vacated, and no god had been promoted to a named divinity in quite some time. With every step, I could feel my own story being written into history. The ceremonious nature of being called to the Great Hall felt meaningful. I was not simply dispatched, as is usually the custom, but called before Ra and the Royal Council. It was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. The door swung open with a heavy creak and echoing clunk. The Great Hall is our most holy place, 2 stadion long by 1 stadion wide, with a vaulted ceiling more than 2 times the length of the room, fading into darkness as it rose. The room is cavernous and without windows lest one. A single skylight opened only at night so that the eye of Isis could peer through. The only light inside the room is provided by the giant flaming eye of Horus. Suspended in midair, the eye illuminates only that which it chooses. Sometimes the whole room, others a single visitor, but always Ra. As I stood in the entryway, I could see Ra sitting high atop a plateau, accessible only by a staircase 1/4 the height of the room, and running the chamber's entire width. Ra sat at attention in his ornate golden throne, surrounded by green palm fronds and a garden of colorful flowers, the ever-watching burning eye shining above him, enshrining him in a single beam of light. As I timidly took my first few steps into the room, a second beam shot out of the huge flaming eye, illuminating my entrance. Slowly I crept forward. I could feel many eyes burning into me, as all the dark spaces left unilluminated held the whispering chatter of the elite guard and high council. To be brought into this room was to be given meaning and purpose. Only the first-tier royal garrison and the high council were ever given permission to come and go from this temple. Ra stood from his throne. His robes were adorned with beautiful, intricate gold embroidery that had a living essence, sizzling and burning, changing constantly with a hiss, inscribing hieroglyphic stories of glory across turquoise cloth, which itself held the consistency of shimmering sunlit water. Ra's eyes burned with the fire and intensity of the sun, and were impossible to look directly upon. His face was long with olive skin and the texture of marble. The eyeliner adorning each eye was etched deep, chiseled into his face rather than painted on. his nose long and distinct, his lips full and pronounced, and on his chin, a long, thin black beard braided in gold ribbon. Adorning the sun god's head, the gold and black Nemes headdress. As Ra stepped down onto the first step below his throne, a halo of flames and sunlight appeared behind his back. With each step, the halo would spark and flicker, sometimes separating at the zenith and becoming a pair of great flaming wings, beating the air around him. As Ra continued to descend the stairs, the eye of Horus began to glow brighter, revealing the enormous chamber as brightly as a sunlit day. The previously unseen royal guard lined the far walls to both my right and my left, nearly blending into the thick greenery, and in front of me the High Council stood at the base of the steps. They looked anxious. Now halfway down the steps, Ra spoke, his voice a deep rumbling, but with a tapered cadence that denoted sophistication. As you know, each night our scribes stand at the corners of the kingdom, recording the music of the spheres. Recently, one such movement was interrupted by a sight of such great curiosity that failure to investigate further could invite ruin. Ra paused for a moment, the court filled with nervous chatter. Smoke, Ra continued, large, black, billowing from the northern forest. Beyond our borders and beyond even the River of Dreams, our oldest stories and fables tell us that the land surrounding our kingdom should be uninhabited, a shifting dream, as it were, with no tangible essence and fading into nothingness, though this smoke could indeed be a natural occurrence. After consulting Thoth, I'm confident in proclaiming it to be a phenomenon none in our kingdom have witnessed before. The recent unpleasantness brought on our kingdom by Set has filled me with an abundance of caution. Unpleasantness indeed. Set had attacked Isis, causing her to flee into hiding. I knew little else regarding the incident, but it was bad enough to warrant a kingdom-wide search for the missing goddess, even into the human world. Set had always been a provocateur, having only recently been allowed back into the kingdom after a particularly long banishment. He and all of his followers were currently under close supervision, but had not yet been brought before the council, as Isis's testimony would likely be required to again banish him. Ra turned his gaze to me as he finished ascending the last few steps from his throne. These are fearful times, he continued. We must be vigilant. There is a growing darkness in the human world, a cynicism threatening to rob us of our divinity, or perhaps our very existence. Should the divide in our kingdom lead to the rise of new gods, we, all here in attendance, would be forced to contend with a fresh fragmentation of the mortal belief structure. Ra stopped and stared over my shoulder, as if caught up in a far-off thought or distant memory. The look on Ra's face betrayed the fact that he was hiding something, some burden that could unsettle the composure of even the most powerful god. The flaming halo behind his back extinguished. Please excuse us. He gestured to the council. I must have a word alone with our young emissary. Ra then took me by the arm and led me into the side chamber, located just to the left of the great steps, nearly hidden in the lush overgrowth of the garden. Ra's choice of words, emissary, vexed me. Not a militant choice, but rather a diplomatic one. Once behind closed doors, Ra requested that I make myself ready and do so with as much haste as was possible. He also requested I recruit a traveling companion, someone whom I trusted without reserve. Our instructions were to go beyond the wooded border and penetrate the shifting forest. Go as far as needs be, leaving no stone unturned, Ra said. The place beyond the River of Dreams has always been forbidden to a god of your station, as it mingles with a realm that's not our own. It is not, however, a danger to you, lest you venture too far, that is, or stay so long you become lost. Again, such a strange choice of phrasing, as if becoming lost was attached to time rather than a place. Ra chose his words carefully and deliberately. We, my chosen companion and I, were to leave in the early morning while still dark, and under no circumstances were we to bring any weaponry. After presenting the skeletal outline of my mission, Ra sat at the corner of the long, thin table spanning the length of the room. Holding a chalice in his hand, he reached across the table to one of the clay jugs sitting directly in front of him, and poured himself a cup of wine. My concern, Ra broke the silence, is Set, having spent so much time in exile, has found a way to cross beyond our borders permanently. He cannot be allowed to defect. The damage he could do beyond our borders is... Ra looked emotionally unprepared to finish that sentence. Because of where I'm sending you, I'm going to impart to you a secret that is only known to but a few gods. Ra shifted nervously in his seat, staring down at the gold chalice he held loosely between his hands. The true meaning of the shifting place beyond our border is known to only the oldest gods. We call it the River of Dreams. But it's much more than that. We caution the younger gods against this place with good reason. It is a place where we are able to intrude into the dreams of men, and is the one place where we can truly impose our will on his world. But to stay there too long is to become lost, and no one has ever charted this proverbial river's true path. Its tributaries and routes are unknown to us. Though one truth we've always held as certain, the River of Dreams has no natural inhabitants. What lies beyond its opposing banks is also a mystery, and that is precisely where you must go. Not just the River of Dreams, but much further. The billowing smoke was far beyond where any of us have ever dared gone before. The oldest myths regarding this place describe it as a realm of chaos, constant creation and destruction, as the ideas of man are tested, to be either forged into being or discarded. Ra took a sip of his wine and placed the chalice back on the table, sitting for a moment with his lips pursed while watching the liquid swirling around in the cup. There's more. Because of who you are, because of who you were, you must be made aware of one more possibility. Ra broke his gaze from the chalice, making eye contact with me, dimming the flame behind his eyelids so I was not forced to look away. We are not all there is. Ra stood up and placed his hand on my shoulder. I will not go further into this. Hold these simple words to heart, though, as they may explain anything unusual you may encounter. And what I'm to say, you are of course not to speak of to anyone, even your traveling companion. Should you find anything unusual, you will return immediately and report only to me. Your surreptitiousness will be rewarded. The halo again lit behind Ra's back as he quickly left the room. The way he paused on the word unusual gave me chills. Though I took the warning to heart, I dismissed the idea that I would find anything beyond set-playing games. Still, I wondered what he could possibly mean by, "We are not all there is." Unusual. What we found, the word unusual does not begin to describe. I quickly chose my traveling companion, and in the morning Mao and I made haste across the sandy plains and through the tall reeds, all the way to the forest edge. And it was not more than 100 steps into the forest where we saw it. The River of Dreams was exactly as Ra had said, though there was no river to speak, only calf-deep water in places and marshy muck in others. The comparison came from the thick channel of fog which flowed through the trees on what appeared to be a set path. Once we penetrated the iridescent veil of mist, the terrain became quite disorienting, as the world inside was a blank white wall in every direction. The sleeping souls of men were gliding through the fog, creating and destroying worlds all their own as they drifted in and out of view. We were safe from entering the bubble of their dream as long as we gave a wide berth to their ghostly shapes. As my traveling companion and I passed closely to one sleeping spirit, I could feel the pull of his soul reaching out and trying to seduce me into joining his dream. The tendrils of his unconscious mind wrapping around me and pulling me closer as I felt myself drifting to sleep. That was before Mao wrenched my arm as well as my consciousness back to the waking world. She most definitely did not seem as affected by this place. The most unnerving inhabitant of the River of Dreams was a creature that was difficult to say was even there at all. What appeared to be a large hooded figure looming in the distance, too far away to be seen clearly amidst the dense fog, but taller than any man, taller than any god for that matter, as tall as the forest trees themselves, and maybe taller still. I would have dismissed this massive phantom as a trick of the fog if I did not see clearly the creature's skeletal hands reaching down and swiping up human souls as they tried to pass it by. I don't know why, but I felt drawn to this tall creature as if I knew him in some strange way. It was the first time that I felt a tug of the memories that had long been closed to me. Still, this was not why I was here. I stifled these thoughts so I could move on without distraction. We moved slowly and deliberately away from the great giant, and to my relief, we were quickly on the opposing side of the flowing river of mist. What my eyes met on the other side was nearly incomprehensible. Underbrush so thick it blocked sight more efficiently than the fog, and trees, tall and looming like millions of our enormous obelisks, had come together in the form of a large, swaying green crowd. I had heard tale of far-off human lands such as this, but it was an environment I was definitely not accustomed to. I looked to my traveling companion for strength, but a sense of equal dread was etched across every line of her face. Nevertheless, we pressed forward. Creeping further into the dense forest, it was not long before we began to distinguish loud voices from the cacophony of forest sounds. Some roaring and hollering, others laughing and chattering. The voices were big and small, of low and high pitch, some with a rasping cackle, and others demure femininity. As we closed in on these unique sounds, it became evident that there was one commanding voice, a voice to which every other utterance was responding. Loud and decisive, this booming, growling voice cut through the forest like a whip crack. We proceeded slowly and with nervous attention until we came upon the source of all the uproarious vocalizations. What we witnessed could only be described as a kind of rally, a rally of monsters, all organic in shape but difficult to define or single out. Their creatures were so varied my mind couldn't make sense of any type, except one. The instigator of the rally was quite obvious, a statuesque man standing upon a stage in the middle of a clearing, taller than even Anubis. The man speaking to the crowd was adorned in red and black leather with blue braided tassels, and a flowing red cape swept over his shoulder. While he spoke, he brandished a sword which he plunged into the stage to punctuate whatever point he was making to the audience. On his head, not a crown, but something that seemed to bestow on his very being a permanent and unquestionable majesty, the horns of a great stag. A warlord king. Intimidating though he was to behold, he was also quite beautiful. His skin was pale and bluish with a slight incandescence. His hair was long and black. His features were sharp and well-defined, with purple lips and eyes flickering between a bright glowing blue and a harsh orange flame depending on the cadence of his words. As I sat and contemplated this creature, my blood ran cold. Something about the way he was commanding the audience and their apparent adoration unsettled my composure, threatening to remove me from my bravery altogether. His visage brought with it a fearful respect, yet his voice was what I found most impossible to ignore. He had the tone and rhythm of grinding stones, but when it hit your ear, all else faded away. His voice alone gave the sensation that I may in fact lose my will in favor of his own, and with it my sanity. When I finally broke my gaze away from him, my further inspection of the crowd had shown the audience itself to be beyond anything the most vivid imagination could conjure. All manner of creatures. Some of them seemed to be organically combined with the elements of the forest, others looked like exotic flowers, but the attention of this particular event was aimed at a large group of insects swarming at the front of the crowd. This is to say that the insects themselves, individually, were small, but there were many. My compatriot and I continued closer, maneuvering our way in the dense underbrush just behind the audience. We were not worried about being discovered. We were of the Jackal Guard, having been trained our entire existence to move in and out of the human world without notice. Quieter than the natural sounds of the forest, we moved into position. Still, I couldn't help but feel that there was something we were missing, that somehow they already knew that we were there. I had asked Mao to accompany me on this mission, as she is my most trusted friend, a mentor under whose tutelage I had grown both in rank and maturity. This is a decision that I now regret. I trusted the fate of my dearest friend to a threat that my own pride would not allow me to entertain as serious. For this, I will never forgive myself. I was, however, deeply grateful she was with me. I cannot imagine being able to move closer to these strange creatures without drawing strength from her. As we came to settle in the underbrush and listen, all was abruptly silent. Even the wind blowing through the leaves came to a stop. Ready to question my own hearing, I looked up and saw the horned man's eyes directly on us. We were completely obscured by foliage. He could not have possibly seen us. but his gaze was so fixed, out of nervous tension, I was forced to look to the ground for a moment. At that split second of inattention, I heard a screeching whistle of wind, crackling, and a dull thud. I looked up to see that an arrow had driven its way all the way through my companion's head and was stuck to the tree behind her. She was dead before my eyes even found her. Terrified, I looked back to see the horned man pulling back a second arrow on the most ornate bow I have ever lain eyes upon. That split second of awe nearly cost me my life. I spun around in place and leapt into a panic sprint. The leaves and vines slowing me down with every step, I retraced my way through the forest, and with as much momentum as my lungs would allow, fled. What had taken a quarter of a day in slow exploration should only take a few moments in frantic return. As I ran, I heard intense buzzing. I looked back to see a swarm moving through the trees, dodging and weaving through every limb, every branch, every tree trunk, with the fluidity of pouring water, and moving directly towards me. Those insects. Panic gripped my imagination. If they were as our scarabs, I was in trouble. My mind flooded with images of dissident gods being stripped to the bone as they screamed out in agony. Just ahead, I could see the river of dreams. I sprinted headfirst into the wall of fog. The mist was again so thick I couldn't tell where I was going, so I sprinted straight forward with complete abandon. Dodging roaming dreamers as I ran, I became vaguely aware that the tree to the left of me was also moving. The hooded creature was right beside me. I saw his long fingers slicing through the mist from above, narrowly missing me with each lunge. As the fog started to dissipate, the giant called off its pursuit, but not before I smashed headlong into a wandering spirit. I felt immediately detached from my previous predicament. I was standing beside a woman who was walking with a caravan down a dusty road. Ahead of them, a monstrous creature with a human body and a bull's head shot fire out of its nostrils. The menacing monster blocked the traveling caravan's path like a mountain, impeding their journey. The woman turned to me as if she recognized me. Her eyes wide, she said only one word, "You!" And like that, I was again outside of the dream, stumbling free of the mist, the giant hooded figure retreating back into the milky soup. I could at last see where I was going. There was still a bit of forest to go, but I felt I was close. This filled me with hope. Which brings me to where I began. I'm moving fast and feeling growing confidence that the entire swarm will not be able to catch up to me. Pain clasps around my brain, like fingers made of lightning. I feel a sharp, searing jab in my back, as if I had been stung by a hooked barb. Or did these insects bite? I'm so close to the desert, sunlight embracing me. I'm warm. I feel everything slipping away. The buzzing has become a constant roar. The swarm is almost upon me. The river of dreams did not slow them at all. Everything is fuzzy. My legs aren't moving as fast as my brain is telling them to. I'm bursting forward into the clearing, into the light of Ra. I feel safe, though I know I'm not. At the same moment, I feel more than 40 tiny little thorns stinging my back. The swarm has caught me. Didn't even feel myself hit the ground. I'm more or less waking up there. Amongst the tall reeds, in the haze, I hear something. I thought I had heard it earlier, but I can hear it distinctly now. Feminine laughter. Almost a giggle. Lying on my side, cheek pressed against the dirt, my eyes are coming into focus. I spot one of the pursuing insects, standing right in front of my face. Except it's not an insect at all. It's a tiny little woman. She is more beautiful than any creature I've ever seen. About the only comparison she has with an insect are her lacen wings, like that of a dragonfly. She stands the length of my hand from palm to forefinger, and she has bright orange hair with the vibrancy of a freshly bloomed poppy. She is also mostly nude, except for a tiny belt holding a pouch of quills, nearly half her size, slung at her hip, and what looks like a blowgun clenched in her fist. She emits a soft light, calming like the yellow glow of a candle flame flickering and dancing in a drafty room. I feel pain radiating from my shoulder and back, like the biting sting of hot needles pressed into unsuspecting flesh. I'm trying to turn back to look at the cause of this pain. Despite my efforts, I can only move to strain my eyes. What little I see, I wish I had not. They've eaten my shoulder all the way to the bone. The entirety of my back is most likely without skin. More of these tiny women are landing on the freshly exposed meat. I feel pinching at my calves and around my upper leg. And the laughter, though distant and barely audible, it fills me with dread. I return my eye back to the one in front of me, who has now curled her lips and exposed her teeth. I will die a dishonorable death. Others will die for my failure to at least gain the attention of the day watch. But then I hear it, the most beautiful and welcoming sound I can recall hearing, the horn of Horus. The watchman has seen me, and since these creatures have pursued me all the way to the border of our land, the watchman has most certainly seen them as well. I feel a sudden shock of wind as a large hawk lands right in front of my face with a powerful thud. In its talon, the small orange-haired creature that was menacing me is now struggling to free itself. The others are standing at attention and swarming to attack the bird, but they are unable to reach the raptor as it lifts off, carrying the tiny prisoner back to our kingdom. Though I will not return, my duty is done. There is no more pain. A wet feeling is creeping up my neck towards my face and cheek. My eyesight is fading, in and out of focus, and I stare transfixed at the tall reeds blowing in the wind just before me. One thought crosses my mind as I lie tranquil and ready. Why were there no gods in the river of dreams? We dream, so where then do we go? Where then do we go? The world is becoming too bright. I can't even close my eyes to escape it. Everything starts to dissipate. As the world is becoming dark, my breath rises and falls in short gasps. And then no more. So tired. I allow myself to sleep. Where then will I go?